When it comes to marketing, when it comes to learning how to sell more, how to create engaging content, how to write better copy, one of the terms that really never gets talked about is awareness. It is a term that I very rarely, if ever, hear anyone talk about when it comes to messaging, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to copy, when it comes to communication. Most people just never know to talk about awareness. Maybe they don't understand what awareness is, or they don't understand the importance of it. But awareness is one of the most powerful understandings, teachings, and tools you can use when you want powerful messaging, marketing, copy, and communication. And that is exactly what we're diving into today's episode. So enjoy. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. This is the first brand new episode we have done since our launch. So if you joined NGM, our signature messaging program, welcome. Congratulations. Glad to have you. Hopefully you're already seeing some amazing breakthroughs. You're stepping into new levels of awareness. Hopefully you're starting to craft some really powerful messaging, gain more clarity, and all that good stuff. With that being said, because we have a new round of students coming in, I have some ahas. I have some, observations of different concepts of, areas where people are kind of going astray, or I see commonalities and questions being asked. And that's always common as students go through the program. They always have questions and try to implement everything in the program. And, you start to see where, sometimes where your teachings can improve on, or just different concepts that may take a little bit longer for them to grasp and all of that stuff. And it's very beneficial because, one, that's how you improve your programs. Number two, it also gives you more insight into where they're at. It gives you more insight, especially since they're brand new in the journey, more insight of where their awareness was at when they came in, what they knew and what they didn't know. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today is awareness. This is also one of the biggest things that we saw during our launch. So, during our 3-day training, I could also pay attention to what, non-students or just our audience is really grasping. One of the things we do inside of our launches is we ask people to share their biggest breakthroughs. Like, what was your biggest breakthrough from day one? What was your biggest breakthrough from day two? What was your biggest breakthrough from day three? And, we do this for a couple of reasons. Number one is obviously to drive engagement in the group, but I also like to do it because I get to see what part of my presentation landed the most, which concepts are landing the deepest with the audience. Because no one's going to share a breakthrough that they had on your trainings if it didn't hit them on some sort of level, didn't give them an aha, didn't give them a dot connecting moment. And so as I started to go through a lot of the breakthroughs, I started to realize, some of the most powerful concepts. And I started to look at where were people, and I started to even look at the questions that were being asked. Where are people not grasping? What are they really grasping? And that led me to coming up with all of that put together led me to coming up with today's topic of this episode, which is awareness. And it's all about awareness. To me, awareness is the secret, the hidden secret to messaging and to life. Now, I could talk about awareness all day long. And it's a very deep concept. And there's different types of awareness. There's awareness of your audience. There's awareness of your spouse, of your kids, of other people. There's also self-awareness. There's different levels of self-awareness, all of that stuff. Right. And I believe that awareness is key to everything. Right. And so for those of you that want to grow your business, that want to grow as a person, you're only going to grow to the level of your self-awareness. A lot of people will say you only grow to the level of what you're willing to change or whatever, but you can't change anything unless you become self-aware that it's even a problem in the first place. And so I always say you can't grow beyond your self-awareness. It just doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. And then even when you become aware of something, you're level to accept it too, you know? So if you become self-aware that you, have, you're maybe a little needy, or you have some sort of attachment style, but you don't have a desire to change it, well, then you're not going to grow. So but you can't even get to the opportunity to grow if you don't have the self-awareness around it. So awareness is everything. And the reason why awareness is everything, especially in life, especially in messaging, is because awareness also creates the reality that you live in. And you have to understand every individual, and this means each one of your kids has different levels of awareness. Your spouse, your friends, your audience, they all have different levels of awareness. And that awareness literally creates their reality, which means every single person has a different version of reality. So things that you might think are bad, someone else may not. A certain situation may go down and someone may perceive it differently than you do, or interpret it differently than you do. And so, a perfect example is last night at the dinner table. We were all, I made a stew for our family, because Tuesdays for us is one of those, for those of you that have kids, Tuesdays are our activity day. So it's like, we're going to tennis, then we're going to swim. By the time we get home, it's already 6:37. So we always do a crockpot day. So crockpot days are our Tuesdays. I made a stew. We sit down at the table, and, my daughter sits down and getting some stew, and then she had it's her favorite meal. So she had 2 or 3 servings of it. And my wife didn't know, and then she's like, "Oh, can I have some fruit?" And we normally, for us in our family, we give fruit almost as a dessert. You can have fruit at the table after you eat your meal. And, she said, "Well, you can have it after you finish your stew." And she's like, "Well, I already had 2 or 3 servings." And it didn't lead to an argument or anything, but it demonstrates the level of awareness where Lily, my daughter, was aware that she had already had 2 or 3 servings, right? My wife wasn't aware. So there's different levels of awareness. So my wife had the reality of Lily is on her first serving and she needs to finish that before she can have fruit. Lily's living in this reality where I already had 3 servings. And because of great communication, they're able to connect the gap and meet on the same level of awareness. There was no arguments. It was totally fine. But a lot of arguments and disagreements and fights are caused because of a lack of awareness and because of a battle of realities, where you may have a reality that is one way and someone has a reality that's the other way. And then you just try to convince and you try to explain to the other person, and you're just battling and battling and battling, and it doesn't go anywhere. And a lot of you are doing this with your messaging, where you're trying to convince and you're trying to explain all of these things to your audience, and it's just not landing. And so what we have to start to do is look at what are the different levels of awareness that your audience has. And this, I'm going to tie this back into your personal life as well, because I do believe having the ability to understand someone else's perspective or their awareness level is the key to great communication. And great communication leads to, more connection. It leads to less fighting. It leads to less arguing. And most people are fighting and arguing or not paying attention to your copy or your ads because there's a battle of awareness. You have a different level of awareness to problems, to mistakes, what's going on than your audience does, but you don't know how to communicate that to them. You don't know how to tap into that. Same thing with what's going on with arguments in couples or fights with families or friends or whatever. There's just different levels of awareness and perception and a massive lack of ability in communication. And then that leads to fighting. So, what we have to understand is if you're having messaging problems, communication problems, content's not landing, usually what's happening is you're talking outside the awareness level of your audience. And this leads to you trying to convince and explain instead of persuading. So when you are persuading, you have effective communication, you're able to communicate at their level. They come to their own conclusion of, this is for me. This is relevant for me. This person gets me. This person understands me. This person has the solution. But when we're not talking within their awareness, it's more of the conversation is more of here's what I know. Here's why I'm right. Here's why you should buy from me. Let me use these bonuses. And it's just this convincer mode of explaining, here's why I'm best. Here's why I'm right. Here's why Here's the best way to do it. Here's the only way to do it. And you just talk outside of the awareness level of your audience. So let me give you a real life example here. I work with a lot of people in the weight loss space, and a lot of the weight loss experts out there, or some of them that I work with, they know that, certain weight issues usually are a result of past traumas. And that's kind of the root cause, is like the reason why you binge eat or you have these cravings. And again, it's not always the case, but a lot of the times there's like these past things that need to be healed. And that's why people can't stick to weight loss routines or diets or plans or whatever it may be, right? So what happens is, like, you as the expert, you may sit there and go like, well, here's how do you need to heal your trauma, and weight gain is because of past traumas and this and that. And you're talking so much from your awareness level, but the average person doesn't know that. The average person isn't sitting there going like, man, if I could just heal my traumas, then I would be able to lose the weight. They're not doing that. They're not saying that. They're not having that conversation. The fact that it could be from trauma, it doesn't even enter their awareness. It doesn't even enter their brain. It doesn't enter their mind. So you're sitting and going like, why I'm delivering gold? Why is no one paying attention to me? It's like, because you're speaking in a reality that they're not living in. You're speaking from a perspective that they don't have. And so what you want to start to do is ask yourself, okay, like, I understand this. I understand that this weight gain and the reason why they fall off their diets, or maybe they binge eat at night, or whatever it may be. I know the reason why they do that is because of these past traumas. I know that, but do they know that? And the answer is no. And the next question is like, well, what do they know? What's in their awareness? What's in their reality? Well, their reality may be that, they've tried 3 diets and none of them have lasted for more than three weeks. And in the past year, they've tried those 3 diets, and they may know that the problem is that whatever they've been doing just feels unsustainable, because that's what their experience is. Their experience is I've tried 3 diets. My experience is none of them lasted 3 weeks or more. My experience is I've done all 3 of them in the last year. My experience is they just seemed really unsustainable. I couldn't do it for more than 3 weeks. It was just too much. That's within their awareness. So when you start to shift your messaging, you start to shift your communication to tap into their awareness, you start to become more relevant. You start to speak to the conversation they're having in their head. You start to meet them at their level. And this is where connection happens. This is where relevancy happens. This is where the understanding of like, this person gets me. That's where all of that starts to happen. So you have to ask yourself, what's within my awareness? What's within my audience's awareness? Like, what is their experience? What are they going through? And then you can always bridge the gap to make them aware of those things, but you can't start there. And I hear that all the time. It's like, well, Brandon, when do we talk about solution? When do I get to the root cause of what's actually going on? And it's like, you get there in time. You have to bridge your way there. You don't start the conversation there. You don't start at the end goal, right? You start at the beginning. So they go like, yeah, that's me. I understand that. This person's speaking to my experience. This person's speaking to my head, to my soul. This person gets it. So when you start to bridge the gap, then you start to move them into your awareness, and you can do that. That process can happen in longer forms of content. So it could happen like a podcast episode like this. It could happen in a webinar. It could happen in whatever. But when you are starting your content, or you're starting an ad, or the beginning of a funnel, it should never start with your awareness. It always needs to start with the awareness of the audience. The other way that people also mess this up is sometimes, like, if you've been a listener for a while, you understand that I push problems pretty hard. I say like, always start at problems, because a problem is where your audience is at. If you describe the problem, then that's going to be within their awareness, because they are aware they have a problem, right? So starting at problems is always great. And that doesn't mean being negative. It doesn't mean being mean. It doesn't mean throwing salt in the wound. For example, if I said, the problem is if you tried 3 diets in the past year and none of them lasted more than 3 weeks, I look at that and I go, okay, well, how do I turn this into content? It could be like, the real reason why a diet doesn't last for more than 3 weeks. There's nothing negative about that. There's nothing, throwing salt in the wound about that. But the content topics stem from a problem which they're aware that they have. The other way that people mess this up is they mess up mistakes and problems. So what will happen is that because we have different levels of awareness than our audience, we start to describe the things they do wrong or the things that cause the problem or things that don't work as problems. So an example is, you may look at that and say, oh, these people are just trying to lose weight by following a fad diet. And I already know it's not going to work because they're going to have to heal the root cause, which is trauma. So you start describing problems as you're just following this fad diet. The problem is the reason why you can't lose weight is because you're following a fad diet. Well, the problem is that isn't a problem to them. To them, that is what they should be doing. To them, that is what they're doing to try to fix the problem. To them, that is the solution. And even if it doesn't work the first time, they're still going to keep trying it, which is probably why they've done it 3 times, because they live in a reality, in an awareness level, in a perspective where the fad diet is what actually is going to help them lose the weight. So when you start saying, well, that's the problem. No, that's not the problem. There's something deeper to the problem. And you, as the content creator, as the expert, you need to go find out what it is. So don't mix up mistakes with problems. So you have to remember mistakes are actions. So if they're literally doing something, you already know you're not on a problem. You're actually on a mistake. And then a problem is actually just an unwanted experience. So it's something they're experiencing that they don't want to experience anymore. Okay. Now this is true. This concept is true with anyone. So your spouse, it could be kids, it could be whatever. So to give you a friend, parent, whatever, to give you, a real life example here, there may be things that your spouse does that bothers you. They're not aware that it bothers you. So if they start doing it and you say, stop, that's so annoying, they're going to look at that and go like, what? What is annoying? I don't know what's annoying. So that's very poor communication. But if you look at it and go, are they aware they're even doing this? Are they aware that this even bothers me? And if the answer is no, then you need to take your communication to that level, which is not saying, hey, stop doing that. It's annoying, or that's bothering me. Stop saying, hey, or you would say something more along the lines of like, hey, I don't even think you're aware that you're doing this, but you're humming, or you're, leaving the toilet seat up or whatever it may be. And it bothers me because of X, Y, and Z. And do you mind not doing it or limiting it or going in the other room or whatever? And that's much more effective, better communication, because you're speaking to the awareness level of your audience, or you're making them aware of something they weren't aware of before. So with me, like one of the things that I do is I hum all the time. Half the time, I don't even know I'm doing it. I'll get on calls and I'm humming and people are like, you're humming. Like, what? Can you mute yourself? In college, I just did it since I was a kid. I think it's one way that I just ground myself. I do it subconscious. I just do it. I just hum songs, sing songs like all the time. I'll be walking through grocery stores and just be humming and people be looking at me. And I'm like, what are they looking at me for? Not even aware that I'm humming. Right. So my wife's a saint for dealing with it, because I don't think I would be able to handle her humming all day long. But let's say it annoyed her. Instead of saying, that's so annoying, stop doing it, and I wasn't even aware I was doing it or that it was annoying, it's going to lead to bickering, it's going to lead to fighting, it's going to lead to confusion. But if she said, hey, you're humming right now and I'm trying to focus on this and it's getting a little bit on my nerves, do you mind stopping or going in the room? Much more effective communication. And when we don't understand the other person's awareness, we don't understand the other person's perspective, when we don't understand the other person's reality, then we start to lead to arguments. We start to lead to problems. And I take this, even do this stuff with my kids. Like even having them, like when, something as simple as having them clean their room, and they aren't aware of why I need them to clean the room or why they have to do it now, then it's going to be so much more challenging to get them to do it. So if I want my son to go clean his room and clean up the Legos because I was concerned that his sisters might walk in there and hurt and cut their feet if they step on the Legos, well, giving him that awareness of my thinking, giving him the awareness of my reasoning, giving him that opportunity to understand on a deeper level, makes it way more likely that he's going to take action on it. So if I walked up there and just said, dude, clean your room and do it now, like, it's probably going to be pretty bothersome to him, especially if I didn't understand his awareness at the same time. So not only does he need to understand my awareness, but I need to understand his awareness. Maybe his perspective or his reality is like, I'm working on something really important and my thoughts are coming in. Like maybe he's in the middle of an art project or doing homework and he doesn't want to stop because he's in the flow. And I'm not aware of that. And he just says no. And then I say, do it now. I'm your dad. And then it's going to lead to a big fight. But if even if he said no, and then I got curious about that and I said, well, why is it a no? I'm trying to understand his awareness level more. I'm trying to understand his perspective a little bit more. And he goes, I'm in the middle of this project. I really, really want to finish it. I have so many ideas coming. I don't want to lose it. I go, okay, great. How about we do it in 5 minutes? Right? So even understanding his awareness level is going to lead to better communication. And then if I asked him and I said, hey, because I don't want your sisters to get hurt, they could cut their feet. Like I know they're going to be coming in here soon. Now he understands a little bit better. So it's such a deeper, better understanding when you try to have communication to understand where people are at, where their thinking's at, what they're aware of, what they're not aware of. I could ask, like, even if I said, hey, we'll clean your room and do it now. And he said no, I could even look at that and say, oh, he's not aware of why this is so important. And I can raise his awareness to that level. And then he's like, I got it. I understand. I see why I need to do this. And again, this to relate this back to messaging, relate this back to marketing is your audience. If they're not resonating with something, they don't understand why it's important to them. They don't understand why it's relevant to them. They don't understand why they need it, or they don't understand or feel heard and they don't feel validated. Those are the main reasons why your marketing, your copy, and your messaging aren't working. Is because you're not getting to the right awareness level that you need to be getting to when you need to be getting to it. So one of the questions I always get asked is, well, Brent, how do we do that? How do we start to get into the awareness level of our audience or our spouse or whoever? And the first thing is just, you need to be aware that you need to be aware of other people's perspective, right? So like when I have communication and there's a disconnect or there's an argument or there's yelling, I always look at that and go like, okay, where's the disconnection? Who's not understanding what? Like, where do we raise awareness level? So anytime like there's any bickering, fighting, arguing, there's like different things like, maybe there's a tone your spouse uses and it bothers you and they just keep doing it. They're not aware it bothers you. So how do you expect them to change it if they're not aware? Right. So that's the first step, in just generalized communication with people. However, when it comes to your audience, the first step is a lot of you are probably doing something, teaching something, helping people with something that you've gone through yourself. So if you've gone through it yourself, then you should have the experience that allows you to tap into the right awareness level that you need. Meaning like what I help you with now, messaging and marketing, all that stuff, I went through a lot of this on my own. I understand the thoughts. I understand the thinking. I understand what you thought was right, what the best way was. I understand what the mistakes are. I understand what the problems are. I understand that. So number one is you can just live or look at your own lived experience, because if you went through it, your audience is also probably starting to go through it. Number two is you can just ask people, your desired audience, the people you think you want to work with, ask them about their experience, but you can also ask them about their actions. So what is the unwanted experience you want? What's the problem you're dealing with? But if you're going to do this, you need to do a good job asking yourself, is this generalized? Is it not generalized? Is this specific? Is it not specific? Is this an experience or an action? In other words, is it actually a problem or is it really a mistake? And then you need to be good at being able to ask those questions. So if someone says, well, Brandon, I signed up for your course because I'm just so overwhelmed and I'm just tired of like trying to get clear my message and nothing landing. I would look at that and I wouldn't just copy that and say, hey, are you overwhelmed and just frustrated because you want to get more clarity on your messaging? No, I would ask them, well, what does overwhelm mean? Because I recognize, you know what? They said the word overwhelm, but overwhelm means different things to different people. So what does it mean to them? And they may say something like, well, I'm just tired of like having spent so much time on content every week, and I would go, how much content are you spending every week? Like at least 10 hours. And I'm like, great. And then I would say, well, what sort of emotions are you feeling when you're frustrated on the lack of clarity? They're like, well, I just don't know what to say to get people to buy, or I don't know what to say to get people to engage with the content. So now instead of saying, are you overwhelmed and frustrated with the lack of clarity? I could say, hey, are you spending at least 10 hours a week working on content and feeling frustrated because whatever you're saying is not getting people to buy? And it feels like an endless cycle. Like that is so much more specific. That's so much within the awareness level of my audience and their subconscious, because that's literally what they're experiencing, literally what they're doing. And when you start to do that, you start to speak that way and you start to make it land, which by the way, some of this takes trial and error. It's guess and check a lot of the times. You start to compile all of these problems, all of these language patterns, all of these phrases, all of these mistakes, all of these messaging elements that you know are going to land, and you start to use them throughout your brand. So you start to use them over and over and over again because they're working, because they're landing. You're speaking within the awareness level of your audience. Now, the thing that you have to do is when you start to speak with people, I kind of touched on this already, but this is the next step is when people give you their answers of their experience and their unwanted experience and their actions, you have to get specific on what those are. You have to ask them what they are. You have to get specific on what they are, all of that stuff. And then number 4 is you have to try it, test it, and pay attention. And what this means is messaging isn't something, and great communication isn't something that you're going to sit down, study, watch a video on, map out on a piece of paper, and then have mastered. You literally need to put it into action, try it, adjust it, look at the behavior, look how people respond, and then come back, go through it again, do it again, test it, try it, do it again, test it, try it. And so most people, especially even people that come in the program, they try to or even pay attention or watch our 3-day event. They sit there and they go, oh, I understand these concepts, but they can never integrate the concepts into their business. And so we see this all the time. We see people come in to our 3-day workshop and then they don't get into the program. And then they come in a year later and then they're in the exact same spot, because in half of the reason is because they don't understand this concept. Messaging isn't something that you're going to sit down, write out on a piece of paper or a Google Doc, and then have mastered because you did the right exercise and you put in the right language pattern. No, you got to test it. You got to try it. You got to feel it. You got to see how people respond to it. Even for me, I don't know what's going to work until I do it. Like I can get pretty dang closer than most, but there's a lot of times I'm like, this is gold. And I put it out there and the audience just doesn't respond. They don't opt in. And so I'm like, okay, well, that didn't really land. Let's try something else. So it's this guess and check, right? You have to try, you have to test. It's almost like a catch-22. It's like people want perfected messaging before they post, but the posting and the taking action is actually what brings dialed in messaging. So, again, it's the catch-22. You want dialed in messaging and you think, well, I'm going to have dialed in messaging, then I'll post. But the posting is what helps you get to dialed in perfect messaging. But the next thing you need is you need to pay attention. Pay attention to what people are saying. Pay attention to what people are doing. Pay attention to what your audience is saying, what they're asking for, what they're commenting on, what they're responding to, all of that stuff. Pay attention. Just pay attention. I'm always listening. I'm always paying attention. We've probably done over 800 sales calls within our company in the last year. And I'm always paying attention to what objections are people saying? One of the things we heard from everyone who would buy from us, one of the things we heard all the time was I attended one of Brandon's workshops. I didn't buy and now I'm buying. So I was like, well, why don't we just do more workshops then? Like instead of doing one workshop a year, why don't we have a product that's not NGM that we can sell year round? And we'll just do a monthly or a weekly workshop. Just get more people into workshops then and keep inviting them back to workshops. And then guess what started to happen? We started to make more sales because I was paying attention. I was paying attention to what people were saying. Then when it came to, okay, we're going to do a workshop, let's do more workshops. I had to pay attention to, well, what topic do we do the workshop on? So I paid attention to what people were saying. They were saying things like our launches aren't performing like they used to. The launches are going down. My launch messaging needs to change. And so we started to pay more attention to that. And we started to do a webinar or workshop on launch messaging. And we started to do it like weekly or monthly, and things started to crack open and really start to flow when we did that, because I was paying attention. I wasn't getting into my ego. I wasn't saying I know best or this is what they need. I wasn't saying any of that. It's more of just like, pay attention to what they're saying, what they're doing, pay attention to the patterns. And then once you have those patterns or those directions or those topics, now you can ask, well, what's their awareness level around this topic? How do I go deeper? What's the problem around this specific topic? What's the mistake around this specific topic? And you can develop messaging for that topic, for that funnel, for that workshop. But again, it all comes down to the same principles, which is you have to speak within people's awareness. So when you speak, when you talk, when you communicate, always try to speak within the awareness level of the person you're having a conversation with. At the same time, if you're having a conversation with someone, you can recognize when they don't understand your awareness, and then you can adjust your communication as well. So hopefully this is helpful for you. Hopefully you guys can take this and adjust some things going on in your business, your messaging, or even conversations you have with your kids, spouse, friends, parents, whatever. If you enjoyed this episode, head over to iTunes, leave us a review. I always love reading your reviews. It seriously makes my day every time we get a new one. So head over there, leave us a review, and I will see you all next week for another episode. Take care. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.